in reality, a lot of these people actually teach me things, which I think is even better, to find people that are more talented than yourselves. I think a lot of the times as creators, maybe a little bit more hesitant to not bring in better people than us, whether they will take over our job or I think just change the style pretty heavily. But I think fortunately I've been able to work with better people, and that actually makes me better as well.
Before we get started on today's episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the land of the Darug people. We would like to acknowledge and pay respects to our elders past and present and the next generation coming through. Now, onto today's episode. We're joined by Joshua Chin today, founder and director of Unmarked Social, a video/visual agency based in Sydney and Hong Kong. Josh dropped out of school at the age of 15 and started freelancing as a filmmaker while completing homeschooling. Fast forward a few more years and Unmarked Social has now worked successfully with big brand names such as Fossil, Rains, George's Cameras, Nike, ING, Snapchat, the Australian Open, and many more. Josh also just got married last week. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get straight into it. Tell us a bit about your upbringing. Like, how did you grow up? What do your parents do?
My dad is an accountant, so he runs his own practice. I think he's been doing it for definitely over 10 years. My mum, she has done a few things. She used to run her own business as an image consultant, balancing that with being a stay-at-home mum. And then now she just got back into working. She works at a health food store, but she always had her side hustles growing up as well.
So you come from a family of entrepreneurs, basically?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely where I get a lot of it from. I attribute it a lot to them.
So tell us how you got into the creative industry.
Yeah, when I was in school, I didn't really have an interest in photography or anything like that, but it was only when I started doing homeschooling where I had so much free time, and my parents weren't super on me about like doing my studies or anything, so I really couldn't find anything to do. So I picked up my dad's old camera, and I was just interested in like taking little videos here and there. I really liked building Lego. So one of my first things that I made was like stop motion with Lego, but I didn't have a computer, so I just like kind of pressed next on my camera and like to watch it back and to make it better and better.
Wow.
So that definitely made me more interested as I was like doing homeschooling. I had so much free time, kept doing more and more of that. So did stop motion, then moved on to doing like time lapses outside. Like I just rode my bike around, and so this was when I was around 14, so I didn't have a car, so I just rode my bike. I set up a little tripod, and sometimes I just sit there for hours. I don't have, at the time, like I didn't have any money to buy any of the equipment to make it actually do the time-lapse for me. So I just sit there and like press the button and then wait 10 seconds and press the button again. So definitely had a lot of patience back then. But that made me super interested in videos and in photography.
What made you get to that point, though? Did your parents encourage a lot of creative hobbies when you were growing up? Were they really creative themselves?
My mum is very creative. She loves making like little crafts here and there, but not specifically pushing me to do anything pretty creative. I think their mindset is more, just do what makes you happy. And I think they at least encouraged me to do that. If that was something that made me happy, then I can continue doing that.
And in terms of homeschooling, I guess, like, how did that transition happen? Because in Asian households and stuff, like parents are very, got to finish school, got to go to uni, got to blah, blah, blah. How did you have that transition with your household?
I think because my family so I'm about 4th generation Australian. So my dad's side, his grandparents came for the gold rush. So they're definitely Australian, like my parents. I would say, like, if you meet my dad, he has an Australian accent. He doesn't speak Chinese. But my mum, she was born here, but her parents came from China. So she does speak a little bit more Chinese, but I think she always didn't really like the traditional Chinese, like, upbringing and the culture of it. So she kind of steered clear of that, and I think pushed her kids to kind of do the same. So we're definitely not your traditional Chinese family.
Nice. It's pretty interesting. I think you mentioned that your sister as well was it homeschooling, or she dropped out early as well?
Yeah, at the time. So my elder sister was already in year 12 at the time. And so they just thought, we'll just leave her in there. But they took both my middle sister and myself and pulled us out to do homeschooling. I think a little bit was because my mom wanted to spend a little bit more time with us. Like, she felt that we're always at school all the time, and then when we get home, we kind of like go out with our friends. So a little bit was that. I think on the flip side as well, I think a little bit was financially as well. We're going to not a relatively cheap school. I think tuition fees were a bit expensive, and at the time our family was just going through something that it just made sense to do homeschooling. Yeah.
What was your experience of homeschooling like?
It was good. I met a lot of people that were doing homeschool, and they actually haven't even gone to school. So that was interesting. I think a lot of them, you could slightly see some people, not everyone, has a few issues with communicating, as if you're brought up in homeschooling, like you're not necessarily around a lot of people all the time. So yeah, connecting with some of them was a little bit harder than others. And outside of that, studies was fairly easy, as my parents weren't super strict on us studying. So yeah, I just had a lot of free time.
That's really cool. Did you feel like you missed out on anything?
Not when I was in that situation, but definitely when I hear about what my friends in school were doing. Even when I started dating Bea, my wife now, she talked about like all these things she did in school, and I was like, yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I missed all these high school moments, but yeah, it's not too bad.
Do you think the idea that you had this much, like how you mentioned, free time because of homeschooling, that gave you the driving factor and the pivot to be able to pursue going into film and photography?
Not specifically. I think it was just something that I was like, oh, I'm really bored, I'll try something. I'm pretty good at self-entertaining, I feel like.
Okay.
So that was just something that, maybe it just made me do something, and that was what I found interesting.
So what happened between homeschooling and starting your own business? What happened in between that period for that to happen?
So I've always been interested in making money as well. When I was little, I toyed around with starting a lawn mowing business.
Nice.
But I just felt like the time you put in it versus how much money you can actually charge for every lawn might be a bit difficult. So eventually I got a job at a camera store. Because I was interested in photography. I really wanted to buy a GoPro at the time. So I was like, man, if I get a job at this camera store, hopefully I can get a really good discount. So I applied for a job, and I think it was the first job I applied for. I was super nervous. Fortunately, the lady was kind enough and gave me the job. And I worked there about part-time, balancing school and work now. And then eventually just slowly got one extra day at work, another day, and then I just started working there full time. So the transition out of school wasn't as abrupt as like, okay, I want to quit school now. It's just like slowly started fading into just working, which was really good. I really enjoyed like the hustle. I felt like I was making money, I was doing something. And then I eventually got that GoPro and started filming like all these little short home movies. And then one of my family friends, he was actually a filmmaker. And he's like, oh, you should come hang out with me if you're interested in it. And I can take you on a job. I can show you like what it's like to be shooting for a client. So I got to follow him a little bit, and yeah, it was just so cool. I was really amazed with what you can do, and especially that someone could pay you to come and film something, and then, yeah, you got a job. It's great.
Yeah. How did you land your first client?
I think my first ever client was just shooting photos for a birthday party.
Oh, nice.
My first real client, I think, was just a referral from my parents, actually. They're super supportive in that way, where I guess like every parent, they kind of like, oh yeah, what's your kid up to? And they like continue to talk about you. So I think they were keep talking to their friends about, oh, my son is doing this little photography thing or this shooting little videos here and there. And I think one of them were just like, hey, do you want to come shoot like a small thing for us? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. So excited about it. And yeah, did it.
So since you didn't take a traditional path and go to college or university to learn your craft, what was your approach to kind of teaching yourself and upskilling and honing those skills?
Yeah, great question. I was always on YouTube. I like lived and breathed YouTube. Even when Casey Neistat was doing his daily vlogs, I was like, every time at lunch break at the camera shop, I would go run up stairs because it was in a shopping mall, and I would sit in the food court. I'd play it on my phone whilst I'm eating my lunch. And I was just amazed with what he did and what all these other YouTubers did. I watched a lot of Film Riot. I watched all these different like camera tutorials, looking at new latest cameras, and it kind of helped since I was working in the camera shop, just knowing what is new. But then generally, I was just super passionate about learning all the technical things.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, so like on that journey, I think you mentioned you had a mentor as well. Did he play or she play a huge role in kind of shaping your career?
Yeah, he was really good. I still keep in touch with him today. He's definitely showed me a lot, especially growing up. And when I didn't have any gear, I was just so amazed because he was like a few steps ahead of me. I was just like, oh, have you heard about this? And he's like, yeah, I got one. And I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Do you want to give him a little shout out? What's his name?
Yeah, his name's Nathaniel Fay. Really good guy.
Nice. So when you started freelancing, this is something that's a little bit of a taboo subject for creators in the freelance space, mainly because it's really difficult to kind of know what to charge. There's no kind of set price. Like every production, every shoot has a different scope, and it's different. Every shoot's different, right? So when you were starting out, it started as a hobby and then it got serious. So what was your approach to kind of, pricing your value, putting a value on your craft?
Yeah, great question. It definitely fluctuates. I think as you start out, you're like, oh, am I really worth this much? Or you just want a job, so you're not really caring too much how much you charge. And I think that's fair. And when you start like that, I think the easiest thing for me, especially because jobs really fluctuate back and forth with how much time they will take, I kind of set my price as how much do I want to get paid an hour? And then maybe how much do I think I'm worth now, and kind of like balance just like an hourly rate. I think that is the easiest. I think as you get better and better, some people do recommend not to charge by hour, just charge by project, because once you get really good, something that will take a beginner a really long time, which they will charge like quite a few hours for, you will not need to take that as long time. But if you charge per hour, it doesn't really make sense. But as you start out, I definitely recommend hourly rate is the best. And then if you really want the job, like it'll be great in your portfolio to like maybe do with a discount of that rate. But even just to figure out, this job will probably take me 10 hours. So it's like $50 an hour, charge $500 for this. But then as you get more and more, it's like, okay, now I got to pay tax, and now I got to like charge GST. So,
and yet your dad as an accountant taking care of all that for you.
Yeah, fortunately he is there for good financial advice. I think it's Chris Doe. He's like, he has like a 30% buffer on top of that. So I think it's like getting to a point, or even when you start out, to even just like think about that in how you charge. It's like I kind of balanced it with what I was getting paid, or what I would be getting paid in just a traditional job. So like say your casual hourly rate was like $22, but you obviously don't get hours, you don't get like that consistency every time. So it's like, that's why freelancers do charge a little bit more. So it would be like, say my hourly rate's $50 for an hour, and then you kind of figure out, I need to pay tax. I also need to pay, like have a kind of profit on top of that. So then you continue to charge like something.
Yeah, nice. And so, as you kind of got more bigger jobs throughout your career, freelancing, let's talk about that kind of first moment where you had your first big client. Did you, like, what was the situation? You don't have to tell us the client, but like, how did you feel? Did you have a little bit of imposter syndrome when you were like, oh, am I good enough to pull this off?
Oh, for sure. I think that's still to this day. Like, we just did a live stream recently, and a lot of the things I'm still like kind of learning on the job. So I'm still thinking, man, I don't know if like I'm charging too much or if I'm actually capable of doing the work that I'm cut out to. But fortunately, it works out in the end. My biggest client, or my first big client, was shooting in India. I think that was more the job where I had to do it on my own. And I was like shooting this big project in India. This was my first time traveling overseas by myself. And I was about 15.
So young.
14, 15. No, I was definitely 15. Yeah.
How'd you get through the logistics of that?
I don't know, to be honest.
You just got through the borders.
Yeah, I was traveling a lot as when I was young. So I do remember this one time I was going to visit my grandparents in Queensland, and I told the story like about a week ago, and they did stop me at the border and it's like, hey, you need your parents to sign off. So I think that was like 12 at that time. But yeah, so I needed my parents' signature for that, and then the rest I never needed to.
Wow.
That's insane because so many creatives spend years and years and years after like studying to be able to travel for their work.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
the fact that you did that at 15 is insane.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to just have so many good opportunities come through the door.
Yeah.
So yeah, this project in India, I wasn't super scared, but I was, definitely challenged in the way of like, oh, I need to pack all this gear. Can I actually do this? But fortunately, the guy I've known for quite a long time, so he was pretty gracious. And I still work with him today. It was gracious to kind of let me come along and shoot this thing for him.
Nice. So you mentioned India, but I know you've traveled to other places as well for work.
Yeah. Actually, on that trip to India, I had a stopover in Hong Kong. And so, I met some family friends over there and met a few clients over there as well, which turned out to be really good. We had a great relationship to continue to go back and forth between Hong Kong and Sydney.
And pre-pandemic, I think you mentioned you were traveling every quarter?
Yes, I was going back to Hong Kong every quarter. And so even now, just trying to figure out the logistics to get back there every now and then.
How many clients do you usually shoot with if you travel overseas?
It varies. So sometimes the project is actually booked here and then we only travel for that specific one. But in Hong Kong, generally I try to line up 2 or 3 clients if I'm there for a few weeks. So that way we can just like get it all over and done with.
Do you enjoy the travel aspect of things?
I used to a lot. I'm like a big advocate for frequent flyer points. If you know me, I'll usually say, oh yeah, use my referral code for this. I'll send you a link. I'll send you all these things. So quite a few of my friends are on the frequent flyer game now. There's like accruing status, getting more points with credit cards and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you don't enjoy it as much anymore?
I haven't done it in a while.
Okay.
But I do remember at a point I was a little bit tired of it, more in the fact that since it's for work, you're not traveling with someone. And so it does get a little bit lonely. And I think that is maybe the harder part of being a freelancer or a creative by yourself. You do get a little bit more lonely in doing the work.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think the reality is when you're on shoots, when you're on production, there's only so much time and budget, and you're kind of working with a lot of constraints. And even though maybe on Instagram it looks glamorous, you're like, man, I'm working 20 hours like today. I'm flying. I've got 2 hours to go sightseeing. There's not a lot to fit in, so you got to be really like strategic with your time as well. So,
yeah, definitely.
It can get pretty, tiring. Yeah.
So you said your dad runs an accounting firm. Is he also an entrepreneur on other projects?
Yeah, on top of running his accounting firm, he always has a passion for just like new projects. Like a lot of the times he comes to me, hey, this is my new idea. And then he like pitches me the idea. I maybe ask a few questions, maybe like get him to think about a few things. But he's awesome in that fact. Like I think as you get older, generally you're more hesitant to start new things or try things. But he's been great to be consistently trying new things. And so one of the things that took off for him a few years ago was this brand called Husky. So it's a coffee cup that is made out of coffee husks, and yeah, those are doing really well, and they're great cups as well.
It's really taken off.
Yeah, you see them in like quite a few cafes now and stuff like that.
So with him having all of these projects, pitching ideas to you as well, growing up, has his influence as being, an entrepreneur, go-getter influenced you?
Yeah, definitely. I actually said this at my wedding speech, that I do attribute a lot of who I am and the way I am to them. Even when we were growing up, he gave us a lot of books to read when a lot of our friends were outside playing or on the PlayStation or something. He's like, oh yeah, you guys should read these books, both my sisters and I. He gave us like Think and Grow Rich and things like that, which at the time I was like really dismissive of. I was like, this sucks. Everyone is outside playing, everyone's doing other things, but I have to read this book. But yeah, I think it really challenged my thinking and changed to what I think about today.
In terms of, I know that you say, your parents are different with their Asian values and stuff. They are more creative. They let you kind of free flow as well. Do you think a lot of Asian values are still held within your family and how you're brought up?
Yeah, in the fact that my grandpa always tells me, yeah, you should buy a house. You should like get a good job. And so definitely stability still carries true with my grandparents. I think in the same way, I do still care about those things. I do still think about them. Stability, good job, and just trying to balance that with, living the life that I think I'm called to.
What other values do you think have carried on as well?
Outside those things, it's like maybe taking your shoes off in the house before you come in. It's definitely an Asian thing. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else. Like, I think it's mainly the stable job has been a big driver. When I first met Bay's parents, they did kind of talk us, or maybe a bit more hesitant on myself, more that I haven't studied at uni and stuff like that. So I do see them, if I was to have kids, I would want them to go to uni. I do think that is one thing I struggled with, not going to uni, not finishing school. These are really hard, definitely more, it's the norm. So not doing that kind of makes you doubt yourself and, I think be a little bit scared to see if you fail.
Is that because of the stigmas that are held? And has that deterred you from anything, or has it stopped you from being able to do anything?
Fortunately, it hasn't stopped me from doing anything as of yet. I do know if I was to apply for a job, I think it might be a little bit challenging if they ask for like tertiary requirements. But yeah, fortunately, it hasn't deterred me from anything so far.
Are Baya's parents quite traditional, and is her family household quite traditional?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely in the fact of like stable job, go to uni, buy a house. But I think they're always willing to learn, which is great.
And has there been a bit of a clash or anything, or has it been a very different transition for you?
Yeah, not specifically hard clashes, but we definitely talk about a few things and have both been challenged on the way we think.
Let's talk about Unmarked Social. So you've been freelancing for a long time.
Yeah.
At what stage did you think, hey, I can build this into something bigger than just myself?
Yeah, great question. I think it goes back to when, as a creator, you like feel a little bit lonely. And so originally I was trading under my own name. I was freelancing. I was doing all those things. And yeah, it got so lonely that I just started to think about, how can I build this to be bigger? How can I like incorporate more people? So that's when I decided I want to start a business. I want to start a company that is bigger than myself to be able to get other people on. I ran a small internship cohort at one point, which was really fun. And even now, like with the jobs that we're getting, fortunately, they're large enough that we can start contracting different people to bring in with more skilled than I am even. And I think that it's not only to fill the loneliness void, but working with other people produces a better product as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the the great things about the creative industry is collaboration. I worked in film and TV for a long time as well. And I think what I loved most about it was working with other people that were just as into the same thing as you are. We're all film nerds. We all got the same references, watch the same shows, we're passionate about the same thing. And I think that's kind of a testament because a lot of people who don't work in the industry don't know how long the hours are or how tight the deadlines are, or like, a lot of the time it feels like you're pulling off a miracle. It's definitely not your conventional, 9 to 5. You don't clock off after 5 o'clock, So there's a lot of extra work that goes into it to make, a piece of content. feels seamless. I guess tell me about your collaborations and different people you've worked with, animators, other people in their fields. What was that process like?
Yeah, I think when it comes to editing, it can be a bit challenging since it is sometimes can be remote or everyone just has different styles. But I think that I'm still figuring out. But when it comes to like shooting on set, having other creators like camera assist or shoot the project for us, that's been really helpful and that's been really cool.
Did you, I guess when you started working with other people, did you take on more of a mentorship role?
I think in the internship I tried. I really did, but in reality, a lot of these people actually teach me things, which I think is even better. To find people that are more talented than yourselves. I think a lot of the times as creators, maybe a little bit more hesitant to not bring in better people than us, whether they will take over our job or I think just change the style pretty heavily. But I think fortunately I've been able to work with better people and that actually makes me better as well.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely don't want to be, like you want to be better. You want to be working with people that you can learn from. So that's awesome. Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you learning from them?
A lot of, I think when it comes to filmmaking or anything creative, there's so many different ways to do something. So some things like little shortcuts here and there, they're like, oh yeah, I knew that. Or it's like, oh, have you tried it this way? And it's just new ways that maybe a bit faster, a bit quicker, or produce a better result. Yeah, it's been really good.
Let's talk about the creative process. So when you're collaborating with people, would you kind of classify yourself as someone who's open-minded or more of a perfectionist? How does that relationship work?
It definitely depends on what it is. But yeah, I would say I'm a little bit more of a perfectionist when it comes to if I have a particular look in the more of the final stage of like post-production. But when it comes to pre-production and like thinking of an idea, I'm pretty open, I do feel like.
And so when you're kind of building a brand like Unmarked Social, did you kind of have a particular aesthetic or branding in mind? Were you conscious about what you wanted to be known as, like, or specialize in?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is still coming with time and a bit of work. But I think when you start a business or when you start a brand, I think especially as a creative, you're like, okay, these are my branding guidelines. These are the colors I'm going to use. These are the fonts I'm going to use. But like every business, you always bleed outside of that, and you consistently see this with clients. It's like, oh yeah, let's try this color, and then you're like, oh, but it doesn't really kind of fit what you want to do. So I'm definitely catching myself out on some of those things, and really trying to brand us in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it. It's like you kind of are forced to kind of think outside the box, and then the business kind of goes in a direction you didn't expect, and I think that's what makes it fun. I think it would kind of get boring if you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And I know you've had a lot of pretty big clients like Nike, Hanes, Fossil. What was it like working with those clients? Was it kind of like a dream project?
Yeah, fortunately, I work with both agencies and brands. So a lot of the agencies, the bigger agencies that we're working with, have worked with a lot of these guys, and it allows us to give our input on these projects. And I think with bigger companies, I love it because I think as you're dealing with, when you're starting out and you're dealing with small businesses, they're a little bit more hesitant on how much money they're putting out. They're like, oh, this is costing me this much. So they're very stressed around the process of creating, and it doesn't always lend itself to the best results. So working with bigger brands that don't really feel the impact of the cost that they're outputting to this project allows them to consistently focus on the best output and focusing on the creativity, and that's been really, really fun.
That's a luxury, I have to say. I mean, like, we service a lot of small businesses, and yeah, totally understand the struggle. I think it's great, and I kind of enjoy like empowering businesses to kind of open up to the world of content and kind of get them. I feel like you have to kind of slowly ease them in, one step at a time. You can't just be like, hey, let's do a full blown out, production. And I think you kind of need to have those baby steps with small businesses. But with big brands, I think that have a very clear vision about what they want and are also open to collaboration. Those seem like the dream project. Yeah.
Do you have any cool stories or experiences that you can tell us about with working with these brands?
So when I was working with Rains, this was like when I was first on Instagram, I think. I was really pushing Instagram for my own, my personal one. So I was taking a lot of photos, going out to the city a lot. And yeah, fortunately, Rains, I think I reached out to them and said, hey, I would love to work with you guys. I think your jackets are so cool. This is when I think they were before they were in like GP and stuff like this.
Right.
So yeah, I think they were small enough, or they weren't as big in Australia. So they're like, yeah, sure. We'll send you some. Let's do this. You send us some photos. And so that was really fun. And when I first got them, I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I took some heaps of photos around. And I think the best part about that was we actually went, as a group of us, went on a hiking trip, and we were like, you know, it'd be cool, get a sponsor for this. And so we spoke to Rains, and they sent out a whole bunch of gear for us to all wear during the trip. And I think that was really cool. I think that's what I love also about collaboration.
That's really cool, because then you could have shared the experience with all of your friends as well, and then it would be a good memory.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Nice. This episode is produced and brought to you by Social Wave. Social Wave is a strategic content marketing agency helping businesses grow revenue using video, podcasts, and SEO. Head on over to socialwave.com.au to find out more. Now back to the show.
What are some dream clients or brands that you love to work with?
That is a great question. I think about this a lot, actually. Apple has always been on the top of the list. And I feel like for a lot of filmmakers, they're on the top of the list as well.
That Spike Jonze commercial with FKA Twigs. Yeah, genius.
Yeah, so cool. Even just watching like behind the scenes and how they actually created that.
Yeah.
I think just the level of production for one video is just amazing. And so I follow the cinematographer actually who does a lot of the commercials on Vimeo. And if anything, I would like to work with him more than anyone. Because, yeah, just his style, like, I really love the creativity. Yeah,
Nice.
So cool.
As one film nerd to another, I guess what are your biggest influences as a creative or as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I used to watch a lot of movies, and I was like, yeah, this is inspiration. And the more and more I was watching them, it is a little bit far from what I want to do. Like, especially like when I do work with more businesses rather than make films. So more recently, I've been just kind of being inspired by different avenues, like woodworking, or like I mentioned earlier, I was into watches and just the artistry behind that. But also with a lot of these other brands, I kind of watch their films, and I've been really inspired lately more by luxury brands and their approach to branding and marketing.
Yeah, which brands in particular?
Watch brands like Omega have been really cool. Tag Heuer released a new ad, which was okay. And then IWC actually is a watch brand that the cinematographer for Apple actually shot a commercial for. So just been watching a lot of those guys and being inspired by those.
Yeah, nice. And so besides those brands, I guess like in terms of films and movies, let's dive into that. What were kind of some early influences on you that kind of made you think, hey, I kind of want to get into this space?
Yeah, I think watching a lot of Rocky, actually. I think it was the music and the whole vibe of like him like up and coming as a wrestler. I was like pretty inspired by, and I thought that was so cool that you can tell like a story about anything. So yeah, Rocky was pretty cool. Big Hero 6 came out at the time, even though it was an animated film. I thought that was so cool in the way that they tell a story through the animation. And like the guy that's like a marshmallow, he's awesome. Yeah, I would say those are the biggest ones. And then even just watching a lot of Guy Ritchie films and the way he like makes everything more exciting and his like fight sequences. I think it just allows me to think like, yeah, film can be fun and film can be like more interesting than, it doesn't have to be just like cut here, cut there. So that's always been really cool.
Nice. Big Hero 6, one of my favorites too. A lot of Asian influences in that with, San Francisco, Japanese characters, a lot of diversity on the screen. This is something I'm also like really passionate about. So I kind of want to get your take on, what the media climate like is right now, and, how diversity has progressed, and what's your position on that?
Yeah, even I watched like movies coming out on Netflix, like Love Hard. That was really good. And even that other one that Keanu Reeves started in.
Always Be My Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So those two movies, like more recently, I was like really drawn to more that like, oh yeah, there is an Asian guy in it. And he's not necessarily the classic Asian guy. So that was that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, I think like for me, I think representation is really important because you know, it kind of validates our experiences. You know, like we've all seen rom-coms with the same actors in it over and over again. But when you have a rom-com like Always Be My Maybe or, you know, Crazy Rich Asians, there's a unique Asian experience tied into these characters, you know, besides the same kind of similar plot lines of, you know, romance, will they, won't they, complication. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot more relatable characters, in my opinion, in terms of their backgrounds, their upbringings, and how that feeds into their experiences. And I think it also means that we can kind of see ourselves on screen. And I think that visibility is so important for other people who want to be actors or who want to work in the screen industry, to have that presence. Otherwise, you know, traditionally, I mean, not all parents are like your parents, but a lot of other parents might still push them into, you know, the STEM pathways. Yeah. So any thoughts on, I guess, kind of influencing a new generation to kind of do something different and actually pursue their dreams and be in a creative industry?
Yeah, definitely. I get what you mean by, like, especially if your parents don't see someone like you on screen, they're like, yeah, that's not for you as well. Yeah. Like, I can still live my life through Jamie Foxx or something like this. So yeah, I don't think I was as impacted by it. And even now, I do see a lot of my friends, they are, maybe it's just the circle that I'm around, but yeah, a lot of Asians like in the film industry, which has been really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember every time I turned up to a set and saw another Asian person, I was like,
that's my brother.
Yeah, it's like it's like that Key and Peele skit where there's kind of like the two black people in the office have a telepathy thing going. They're like, yeah, I think it's awesome because it really means like, hey, you know, this is another person that kind of did something different.
I also think that it's like you don't realize that you're missing out on the representation until now. Like you can see it and you're like, oh, like I didn't actually grow up with that many Asian people on screen either. Now it's kind of cool to have it and it's really inclusive, right? Yeah. Were you a bit weirded out were you guys both weirded out when you first saw like Crazy Rich Asians? It's like, oh, that's a whole movie with Asian people in it that I can't really relate to. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like, look, I mean, it's not my cup of tea. Like, I'm not huge on rom-coms, but I think I celebrate it as a huge win. Yeah. I think it's like literally every notable up-and-coming or recognizable Asian actor was in this one film. They all, you know, were fantastic.
Everyone was talking about it.
Everyone was talking about it. I think you need these kind of pivotal moments in history, in film history, to kind of just be like, it's possible. Yeah. Show the whole world like it's possible to have a full Asian cast and have a successful box office movie. Yeah. Creates so many avenues and opens so many doors for people as well. Have you thought about, I guess, when you're working creatively and casting talent in your content, have you ever thought about diversity or?
Not specifically. It has been more driven by the brand in terms of who we hire that goes on screen. Yeah.
But would you say you've worked with, you know, fairly diverse talent? Everything from models to, you know, actors to even just regular people?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's definitely not 50-50 though. I think that's just, I think in Australia, the people themselves aren't biased towards one another, but I think maybe the brands or like the image that people want to portray, still Australia is more of a white kind of culture. So yeah, maybe that's why the brands often opt for someone like that. Yeah,
I'd say so. I mean, I think that's why I love celebrating when there's more diverse people both on screen and behind the scenes, because then there's more influence, or there's more, I guess it's more normalized. So, you know, the more we see Asians on screen, it's normal just to be like, hey, these are, you know, we can play all sorts of roles, we can be all sorts of characters. And I think that normalization is really important as well, because then it doesn't, eventually it won't become a bit of a shock factor anymore. It'll just become like, hey, this is totally cool. Like, I don't know, might be 10 years down the track, 15 years down the track, but what I would like to see in the Australian screen industry is just, you know, someone from an Asian background who can play fucking anything that doesn't have to do with their background necessarily, but can be the lead in a, you know, any type of genre. Any
Like
type
a
of
normal
movie.
thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to friends and family, you said you had a really nice tight-knit circle,
Mm.
you know, of other filmmakers. Has anyone influenced you specifically in terms of your circle, besides your dad and stuff like that? Like, who has been the handful of people who have influenced you?
Yeah, definitely. I think as a smaller creator, when I was trying to find, I'm still small at the moment, but when I was trying to find my feet, people that really helped me was people that ran their own agencies, and trying to get your foot in the door to meet a few of those guys. I think they can give really good insight, and just give you advice that you didn't think you even needed.
Yeah.
Has been really helpful.
Do you have any specific people that you've been surrounded by?
I can't really think of them off the top of my head, but definitely I have been supported by a lot of people, for sure.
And what was your parents' reaction to when you first transitioned into this, and also now, what's their perspective on things?
They are very proud, which has been very helpful. I think even when growing up and when I was trying to just start it, they didn't kind of like send me any doubts. They kind of just like, yeah, I know you'll do a good job. And I think that has been really encouraging. And I think maybe not as many people get that same opportunity to have parents like this. But yeah, they have been very supportive, very encouraging. They said, yeah, good job. They send clients to me every now and then. And yeah, just a great experience overall.
So you mentioned you got into like watchmaking and other types of crafts. Yeah, what kind of started that kind of interest for you?
Even as a young kid, as I was like continue to tinker with Lego and all these things, I've always been interested in creating and doing stuff with my hands. So I think that's why I gravitated towards filmmaking, because it is kind of a handmade thing, kind of, not really, but yeah, I've always loved to do things with my hands. So picking up a camera, picking up some tools to do some woodwork. I'm also in the watch thing, I'm more appreciative of the craftsmanship rather than like, I don't think I can make it myself because there's so many like little bits, but I've been really interested in how this small little piece of machinery has been crafted and all these little things that go into it and all the hard work.
Nice.
And you've been documenting that process as well?
Of my woodworking, yeah, I try to on my YouTube channel. It actually is really hard to film yourself doing something else. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun, like kind of project in the background.
That's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when you're kind of learning a new craft, I think you've kind of shown a strength in kind of being self-taught. But with something like this, did you kind of have other people that taught you the craft, or did you learn entirely through YouTube or just?
Yeah, even when I was younger and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, Nathaniel Fay, the guy that I was telling you about, he had a director friend that booked in quite a few jobs, and so I got to follow him on those ones as well. So we ended up doing a few restaurants, a few cinema commercials, and even ended up going to Hilton. Both, I think they did the one in Sydney, and then we went to Melbourne as well. And I learned so much of just being on set. There's quite a few other guys that were on set as well. So it was just kind of like walking around as a young 14-year-old, trying to look serious enough to be here and just following them, looking at what they're doing. And that has really taught me a lot.
Yeah.
But also just every night and day just was on YouTube looking up new tutorials on how to do things.
Nice. So you mentioned obviously you got into the industry when you were very young. How did people perceive you as this young kid that's kind of walking around at set and following people around?
Yeah, I really tried, and I did a very poor job of trying to like look a bit older. But
we can't. We're Asian. We're gonna look like this till we're like 50.
Yeah, I do have a more baby face than at that time as well. It was kind of challenging. I didn't run into any specific things, but I did kind of have to let people know, hey, yeah, I'm with these people. I'm not just kind of like standing around.
Yeah, nice. So what was some, like, I guess some of the biggest like lessons you've learnt starting out in the industry? Because it's, you know, for anyone who hasn't kind of been exposed to a set and how many moving parts there are, it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So yeah, was it a bit of a wake-up call, or was it kind of everything you imagined leading into it?
Yeah, I definitely had a slightly different vision of what it would be like. I thought it was, just magical, and just everyone's kind of like flying around on set. But on set, it's quite stressful. Everyone's doing their own thing, but I think the best thing I've gotten is just to try not to take everything so seriously. I think a lot of the times when I was before prepping a set, I was like, before prepping a job, I was like, this is the most important thing in my life. But even the client, I think about them, and I think they're probably not like thinking about this job 24/7. Everyone at the end of the day wants to go home to their family or spend time with their loved ones. So this is kind of just, this is, something that they can put their hands to and build. So everyone's passionate about it as you are. Don't be afraid to ask as many questions, even though everyone's like flustered on set. I think that's the best thing. It's just to ask questions, be curious. And even as I get older and hopefully a little bit wiser, I want to stay in that position of asking questions to everyone, whether it's someone that has just started out or someone that's been doing it for many years. I think you can learn so much of everyone.
Yeah, nice. That's a really good good approach. So when you're on set and you're learning from all these different people, what was one, I guess, standout experience on set that you wouldn't forget about?
This one, so I've been shooting like quite a few different things, from food to fitness to fashion. And I think as I was getting into fashion, this is the most interesting thing. It was with my friend Kay. So he's a fashion photographer, and I think he lives somewhere in Asia now. So like I think India or something. But he was the best. When he was in Sydney, we were shooting like a whole bunch of things, and he's like, hey, you should come around. We're shooting a lot of spec work. And that was one of the first times I was introduced to spec work. I was like, this is really cool. It's like you can just do whatever you want and really make it how you envision. Obviously, you're spending your own money. But yeah, we're shooting this thing, and then we ended up getting to a job that was for, I think he wanted to shoot like a lingerie kind of vibe, and he was using like perspex to put in front, and I was like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then I was kind of standing around, and then this at one point this lady's wearing no clothes, and I was like, I'll just be here standing holding this. And I think I've had a few of those moments when I was shooting like some art things as well. I was so shocked. I was like,
so natural.
This is
I do this for a living. This
is bizarre. But yeah, that was pretty funny at the time.
Memorable.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we wrap up, a few more questions. Do you have any travel plans in the future? Like what's in store for Unmarked Social in the future? What's in store for you?
I think everything I'm still trying to figure out, as everyone is.
Yep.
But the dream would be to have a space that we can open up to creators to come in, and whether they do their own thing or they work with us, I think that would be the biggest dream. And in combination with that, I do want to go overseas. So kind of they work against each other. But eventually my partner and I, we want to live overseas. So go to the UK or New York eventually. Just to experience what that life is like and hopefully get better opportunities over there. So that would be great. And then, continue making stuff.
Yeah. So I guess, as this business is growing, have you kind of got a bit of a plan in terms of getting more people involved so that it'll give you the bandwidth to go and do all these other things that you want to pursue?
I kind of have a plan, kind of just winging it as I go. But fortunate enough that we've had a lot of connections internationally. So there was at one point times when I was doing some work in London and in Europe in general, and some in the States. So I kind of just want to kind of feed off those and see where those can take us, especially since we'll be there. So
it's really exciting. So from a business perspective, you're still a young guy. You're still very young. So when you're talking to clients and you're getting new work, do you find that the age is a little bit of a factor that kind of plays into that relationship, or you find that you're able to kind of inspire confidence that, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've got 20 years of experience under my belt. I did this when I was 5.
Not specifically. People do ask when they first meet me. They're like, "Oh, how old are you?" But I don't think that deters them. I think it's really the work speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And it's more the work that actually they are drawn to in the first place, because that's how they find you. They're like, "Oh yeah, I've seen this somewhere," or "I've been recommended to you by this person that has got this done." And yeah, I think work can speak volumes.
Yeah, for sure. I think portfolio is everything in this industry. What's something in your portfolio that you are the most proud of?
A few months ago, we actually shot with Commando Steve.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, that was really fun. Like, we just rocked up. We're shooting a few fitness pieces for a company in Canada, actually. And so they sent over all their stuff, and they had the representative here, and they got Commando Steve on for some reason, and he like rocks up in this massive truck. It's like a Land Cruiser, fully kitted out in like a desert color, and he comes out and he just looks like so iconic.
Commando Steve.
Yeah, and so that was really fun, just to meet him and to kind of work with him.
Was he really like a hard ass? Or was he actually like a softie?
Yeah, he's like super easygoing,
Yeah.
and he's like, because we kind of have to direct him to do certain things. And he's like, "Hey, can you do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, for sure."
Wow.
And everything is so light to him, so he's just like lifting weights.
So the whole hard ass thing is just a personality.
Yeah,
Branding.
yeah. Maybe if like we needed to get into shape, or he was like training us, then I think
Different
it'd be,
story.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of your work as well. It's centered around showcasing friends and family as well, and a lot of memories. Do you think that bleeds across to work that you do for clients as well, of how you have a different perspective on how you shoot stuff?
Yeah, I really like incorporating people, definitely, as much as we can. I try to like encourage our clients to incorporate their staff if they can, or get models in, or get some life into their business. That's been really fun. Definitely when I was growing up and I was first getting into like film, I actually went to my cousin's 21st birthday, and his brother, so my other cousin, put a video together of all these little home videos of when he was growing up, and they played it for the whole party to see. And I was just amazed that videos can capture memories, and that's why I do love documenting small things here and there, because I love watching it back in the future. And videos are great because you both get audio and the visual and a bit of movement, whereas a photo, you kind of have to remember the memory from that photo. The video is just that memory already.
And what differentiates you from other filmmakers?
To be honest, not that much. I think I get that asked a few times from clients sometimes, and it's not that much. A lot of people can film things, a lot of people can do the same as us, but I just know that, you know, if they're willing to have a great time, we'll have a great time as well. And so I can't really say that we're too different, but
I guess you offer a pretty personal perspective and experience as well with the client, sounds like.
Yeah, fortunately with the clients that we've gotten to know, they're very easygoing. I think that's kind of one other thing that I would say to a lot of freelancers is like, pick and choose your clients. Obviously you want to get to a point where you can do that, but when you do, it's so much better to work with people that you love and you like to hang out with.
Of course.
Yeah, definitely. On that note, talking to, I guess, anyone who's listening that is looking to take an alternative route, probably not study and pursue their passion full time. What kind of advice, what other advice would you have for them?
Yeah, that's tough actually. More so like Bea, my partner, she has a small brother, and I just kind of like think about him sometimes. He's still figuring out like what he wants to do, and yeah, advice is tough because obviously I don't want to lead people in the wrong direction, and sometimes people think it is a bit easier to get into. But definitely has its struggles, especially if you drop out. Like one of the things I had was that doubt of like, oh, I don't know if I can go back to school, or I haven't finished school, so maybe I won't be able to get a job if I decide to change careers in the future. So if I was talking to him, I would say, yeah, finish school, maybe do uni, maybe do a small degree. But in the meantime, definitely build up your skills in something, whether that's photography, filmmaking, or something else. yeah, I think consistently learning is the best. So if you can continue to learn new skills and practice on the side, and eventually if you get good enough, you can kind of transition that to a full-time thing. I think that's the best route to do.
I
Great.
think a lot of people can struggle with that little kind of gap between a hobby and a career.
Making it a side hustle.
Well, yeah, making your side hustle your main hustle. I think there's a lot of perseverance involved, right? Like, I think, you know, it's easy to glamorize, but there's countless hours you're putting into perfecting your craft, getting good at what you do, and making mistakes and learning from them. So I think there's a degree of patience that you need as well, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
I think you're kind of like an exception to the case, because I think you did it when you were very young and moved really quickly and had a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. And I think that's what allowed you to become, you know, so successful at a young age. So yeah, any advice on, I guess, kind of getting real world experience that's hands-on and meeting other people, and yeah, anything else in terms of what they could do practically to learn more and accelerate that process?
I have a few friends in uni that they're studying film, and they're like, yeah, I don't know how to get a job because I don't have any experience, and people want experience, and people won't hire me to get the experience because I don't have any experience. So it's like a catch-22. But yeah, like I said, I think practically you can challenge yourself in finding passion projects, and that will kind of build out your reel already. Especially if you want to start filmmaking, your reel is pretty important to kind of show people. But on top of that, like a step further, you can kind of go into what you want to create, or you can kind of figure out, if you want to accelerate it a little bit more, you like, what do some people need? Say like a certain industry that you might think like, oh yeah, I like telling stories about people. Healthcare is pretty interesting. Or like, yeah, that kind of vibe. And then you can like actually film something directed at them. And then if anything, pitch it to kind of those kind of companies. That's how I'd probably do it if I was starting out now, practically.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I think the key there is like being proactive. I think, you know, it's easy to kind of fall into that attitude of being like, oh, wait till the work comes to me. But like the reality is you may be studying, you may have a degree, you may have just graduated, but you're kind of a nobody until you actually go out there and make stuff and get good at something. And I think a lot of, you know, what people don't mention is like you said, being proactive, reaching out to other people and kind of getting out there and creating things and building a reel. And a lot of the times you're just going to have to work for free. Like, you're probably not going to get paid for a while. That's the reality.
Put in the work to get the work.
Definitely, yeah. But I think like once you put in all that work and then you finally get your first paid client, your first big client, your first dream project, I think that's what makes it worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, I reckon you've had great advice given to everyone. You've had so many stories. But I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you for coming onto the podcast today, Josh. Where can we find you on socials?
Yeah, you can find Unmarked Social on Instagram. We're slowly bleeding into LinkedIn,
Nice.
but very slowly. Yeah, ping us a message, I guess, if anyone wants to ask a question or something. Yeah.
Can they find you personally as well?
Yeah, they can at Josh M. Chin. I'm on YouTube sometimes.
Like and subscribe. Hit that
Like and subscribe.
Yeah,
notification bell.
You can try. I'm on Instagram, but yeah, rarely post. So up to you if they want to subscribe or follow.
Please subscribe. His work is amazing. You
Yeah,
will get a
really
lot.
good content.
You will get a lot out of it.
Yeah, it's been great having you on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Level Asian podcast. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode. And why not share it with friends and family who might enjoy it too? Also, make sure you head over to levelasianpodcast.com to join our email list and to receive the latest updates and get notified when the next episode drops. If you know a great guest we should feature, email us at contact@levelasianpodcast.com or DM us on our socials in the show notes. Catch you on the next episode.